Welcome back. This is video number 10 in our series, What If Jesus Was Serious About Prayer by Skye Jethani. And so far, I know I've really been enjoying the book and the series. And today we're going to cover chapters 25, 26, and 27. And these are, again, a little bit more, I wouldn't say controversial, but sort of maybe more on the fringe. Then we must be careful not to abuse our authority. Then we will care more about being faithful than being respected. And lastly, prayer is how we connect others to God. So I think to kick this one off, Jason, we really need to sort of maybe confront our feelings about authoritative prayer. I know for me, it's been so talked about and so overused, and I would maybe even say the word abused, that sometimes even as a pastor, I'm reluctant to even talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is because it's been so abused and used, weaponized even in a lot of ways, that and just so everyone's aware, like, we can pray with authority, but just how sometimes it's been used, you don't really want to do it because you don't want to come across wrong, or again, there's a lot of baggage with it. Whether it's a televangelist,
or abusive. Yeah, I know the televangelist thing always gets me, where they oversimplify authoritative prayer, and they make it sort of the name it, claim it, or if you just pray in the right way, and God will give you whatever you want.
Well, and it really points to a much more individualistic, consumeristic sort of mindset than necessarily a grander gospel story mindset.
And I think it's even gone, even in the Christian community, when we pray with authority and things don't happen the way we want them to, or we expect them to, then sometimes we feel there's something wrong with us. You get accused of maybe there's something sinful in your life, or that you don't have enough faith, and that even though we have the authority, the problem is with me.
It's actually Skye Jethani in another book. He talks about a posture of God, which I think this would fit under, which is living a life from God. And then it's the idea of, like, you're doing all the things that you need to do to get the thing you want from God. Yeah. As opposed to, again, we want to live a life with God.
With God, yeah. And I think that doesn't necessarily mean life is going to be easy, or that we'll never experience suffering of any kind. Mm-hmm. And I think somehow the Christian culture has made suffering out to be something that God doesn't want for us or plan for us. And I don't think God wants it for us, but because we live in a place that, on the earth where God's kingdom is not fully realized yet, that suffering exists. And sometimes Christians get sick. Sometimes they have pain. Sometimes they're persecuted. And it just is something that happens. In fact, Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, in our previous series, we talked about this in Matthew chapter 5, that his followers should expect persecution and suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think what happens when the idea of moving into authoritative prayer, really, and I think the key word here is going back to that. We want to live a life with God, in communion with God. And so, when we do that, we will grow in our maturity and wisdom and intimacy with God, which then that authoritative prayer comes naturally out of that.
And I think, just going back to the previous video, I think discernment is the key here.
Huge.
In that it takes that intimacy with God, the communion we've been talking a lot about. It takes wisdom and maturity, and even maybe a little bit of experience under your belt with this, that to determine what God's will is. Sometimes, authoritative prayer, we can pray authoritative prayers, but we have to trust that God knows what's best for us. And in the example, I like, the example that Skye uses in the book is to have the discernment whether to tell the mountain to move, which Jesus said we could do, or to take the time and painfully climb the mountain.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good example of what we want to see. Hey, God, show me.
Yeah, and I think that takes us to the next chapter and the next point, where sometimes we actually neglect to pray with authority because we fear what the outcome is. Or specifically, we don't get what we asked for or what we prayed for. And we think that somehow we're going to lose respectability, particularly within the Christian community, if things don't turn out the way we prayed.
Yeah, it does hit that thing, which, if we're honest, we all struggle with it to some degree. But as long as it makes me look good, kind of idea. Like it. How is this going to make me look in front of people? Like, I'm good to do it as long as it makes me look good.
Yeah. And I think, and the example that, again, Skye uses in the book is really good. The example of both Peter and James, the brother of John, being imprisoned by King Herod. So James is imprisoned by King Herod, and people pray for his release, and King Herod executes him. Yeah. And then it pleased the people so much, he decided to arrest Peter and was going to do the same to him. And then people prayed for Peter, and he was miraculously freed by an angel. And then in the book, Skye says something that was just kind of between the eyes for me was God's will was accomplished in both cases. And of course, we can't always see what God's will is. And of course, in hindsight, we can look back and see that because of the execution of James, that brought great persecution to the church, and it was scattered from Jerusalem, where up until that point, Jesus had said, go to Jerusalem, Samaria, and the other ends of the earth, Judea and the other ends of the earth. And mostly they had stayed in Jerusalem for quite a long time. And the execution of James caused the church to be scattered, where Peter, being freed and released, became a leader in this new movement, even outside of Jerusalem, and in fact was a pioneer to the Gentiles. That's people who are non-Jews becoming followers of Jesus.
Yeah, it really seems like the overall thing, especially that we need to really hold on to, is trust God.
Yeah.
Trust Him with the outcomes. Work towards the ends, towards His mission with prayer, love, generosity. And again, trust God with the outcome at the expense of possibly trying to get the approval of whatever that might be, the religious community and stuff like that. Do we trust God?
Do we trust God? To trust God that He knows what He's doing. He knows what's best. He knows what's best to accomplish His mission. And even though the disciples were praying with authority, even for James' release, that really wasn't what God intended. And of course, it seems horrible that his death would have to happen in order for the church to scatter. But I don't think it's necessarily God causing the death to happen, but God turning things to good from things that did happen.
That's true.
Then I think if we get into the last chapter, which is a bit of a change in direction maybe from the authority thing, but I think it still is related to that, is that one of the greatest things we can do for other people is to pray for them. And this is Skye brings out the point that this is a direct fulfillment of Jesus' command to love one another. And so one of the most loving things we can do for other people is to pray for them.
Yeah, and it is, again, taking a role of the priest, bridging between that being a bridge between God and another person.
Yeah, and what can be more loving than that, really?
Well, exactly.
And pick up another person's needs, whether they're followers of Jesus or not. It's that it becomes that point of connection, which is really what the priest was supposed to be. That's a sort of a visual we get from the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I'm kind of reading through those chapters right now in my personal readings. And, sometimes if I'm honest, we start reading about the vestments and all the colors and all that kind of stuff and the dimensions of things. And it gets a little tedious, I'm not going to lie, but we see what the role of the priest is and what God intended it to be. And the fact that this is actually a throwback to the Garden of Eden in the way he actually made us in the first place.
Right.
That we actually bear the image of God. And so the restoration, or becoming a follower of Jesus and living under the kingdom of heaven, this gets remade in us.
Yeah, and what a way prayer can be. This is a way. Sorry, I'm gonna start that again. Prayer can be such a wonderful
real, right?
way. Yeah, it's just. I'm gonna start it again.
Yeah.
Prayer is a wonderful way that we can connect people with God, and that's what we want to do, and be able to express our love for people by being a connecting point between them and God, and express our love to God by spending time with him and trusting him in his character to answer those prayers.
Yeah. In the way he sees fit. And that's
in the way he sees fit.
But that doesn't, again, I think there's a certain authority to this. We certainly have the authority to pray for people. But again, it's that discernment thing about using authoritative prayer, using even actions to demonstrate. And we did talk about, accomplishing mission through prayer and love and generosity, even if the outcome isn't what we expect.
Absolutely. Well, again, we are hoping you are going through this book, that you are growing in your understanding of prayer. And even more so that, it's one thing we can sit here and maybe learn about prayer and be challenged in prayer, but we just really want to make sure we're encouraging people to make sure they're taking time to pray. All of this knowledge is great, but it really needs to lead us to a place that we are praying, we are spending time with God. And we just hope that there's something you are doing, and we are praying for you in that connection, that just becomes real and vibrant and just so life-giving. So again, if there's anything that has leads you to some great questions, need for discussion, please do that with a friend. Do that in your missional communities. There will be questions kind of in relation to these 3 chapters we just went over in the show notes. So do that. Start some wonderful conversations. And again, don't stop at just having a conversation. Encourage each other in your prayer life. So have a great time, and we'll see you for the next video.